web, electronic one, I guess. I think I should leave some things to the MC. I'm right. I'm annoying him a little bit so he doesn't go easy on me. He likes me too much. As of today, more than 25% of gold comes through Dubai. I know for a fact that number will increase for many reasons. The Dubai is amongst the top 3. And when I say amongst the top 3, almost neck to neck with Antwerp and Mumbai and New York. So, you know, if you're talking about production, yes, Mumbai is the number 1. But if you're talking about trade, we're up there with the top 2. The location, you could have the best location, but if you don't have the will and the need to go after what is required, you don't want to go the extra mile, work the extra hours, go sleepless nights. What's going to differentiate you? We used to have an old saying before I even went to college, is that for Dubai to make a difference, it has to work 10 times harder than the rest of the world, put 10 times the effort, 10 times the project. And actually it all paid off. And these are things as a kid embedded in me. I think it's important that to understand what does DMCC benchmarks itself to? Well, it's Hong Kong and Singapore, simply put. They know when they want something, they go after it and they get it done, especially Singapore. There are 2 main airports. That one is operational and it got expanded 3 times, and then you have Dubai World Central. You have Jebel Ali Port and DP World, that's all around. Emirates Group, that with Emirates Airline landing in every continent. So air freight and freight by sea, if those 2 were not as active, as big as they are, DMCC would not look like it is today. So really, without them, we would look completely different than we are today. So I have to take my hats off to them. Logistic capabilities in Dubai is phenomenal, and I know Dubai is very hungry for more businesses, more landing rights. To mention some of the top companies in DMCC, some are in Almas, some are not. I can tell you Harley Davidson, for some reason, refused to go anywhere except Almas Tower. And I had to make sure it's Harley Davidson, the corporate, not Harley Davidson, the gangster club. So their office looks like a Google or a Yahoo office, so it's a bit funky, but they're pros, and they all come to work in Harleys for some reason. We have a few companies. Some actually I haven't seen. I think it's or I maybe forgot. We have Clarkson, Lewis Dreyfus, De Beers, Daimdel. No one expected that, and for De Beers it's a bit of a challenge to move into DMCC. They moved in about 3 years ago or so, and it took them 6 months to make that decision. And we asked them, why did you come? Why now? They said, most of our site holders are in Almas Tower, so it would be dumb not to be in Almas Tower, where all the site holders and their services are for site holders and non-site holders, as long as they fit the criteria that De Beers has. ConocoPhillips is one of our members, Rio Tinto, Alcan, LVMH, Notilka Danone, and a few others, even Delta. I thought Delta was a name copying Delta Airways. When I said, why do you take their name? They said, no, we're Delta and we focus on faucets and shower and material, and actually the airline took our name. Okay, whatever you say. It's just that I felt the airline had the thing, but apparently the faucet sides and all that went well. Rajal Girg came to the opening with me in that building. We also have the world's tallest Swiss tower in the world. Why do I say that? Because it's filled with Swiss entities. The Swiss Business Council, and I hear that they're close to closing the deal with the consulate. I'm not sure how much they've got into that, but actually that's the tallest Swiss tower in the world, in Jumeirah Lakes Tower. So the people who are in JLT are people who want to make their mark, whether it be design, height, and all that. So I'll leave it at that, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you very much for bearing with me.
A couple of rules for today. One of them is this is going to be very interactive, and Ahmed has been kind enough to give us open access to giving frank and candid responses, so I think that's great. The second thing I think is really, could you kindly put your phones on silent or on vibrate, please? Because but if you go to your BlackBerry or your Samsungs and iPhones, it means we have failed, not you. So you're going to make sure that you keep engaged. Hello. So that's really the second most important thing. And how many people here are in JLT? How many companies here? Just want to get a cross-section just to get a feel. So it's about 15–20%. That's very interesting. I thought it would be much greater, but why aren't you there is going to be one of the questions we ask today.
Excellent.
Number today. And Ahmed, you know, it's exhausting sometimes when I hear you speak in terms of the amount you're achieving and the speed at which you're achieving. It just simply defies gravity. It just doesn't make any sense. However, you're doing it, and it's real, and it's there every single day of your life. Let me just take a flashback into the early part of your life.
Before you continue, you said 15% of JLT are here. I'm actually happy about that. That means they're working night and day. DGCX is almost 24/7. It's hard for them to come here. You look at the Gold Souk. Try an event at the Gold Souk. You will not get them to go to JLT. It has to be close to the Gold Souk. But that's changing. We've taken some of their big players into Almas, Gold and Silver Tower and the other areas as well, and the refineries. But the reason that not many of them here, I'm surprised that there are 15% here. Why aren't you working? Anyway, you know me, you're going to get I'm a columnist in KIP Report. You get on my news and all that, and you know, you can send your colleagues. Unless you've delegated, fine.
Yeah, and if you're following Ahmed on Twitter,
I suggest you don't.
That's a roller coaster ride.
It's distracting. Okay, your question, please.
My question was, going back to your early days, what is the engine that drives you? What was the early days in your life that shaped you to be what you are today? Family, education, an incident in your life. What made you what you are today?
Well, because of the name I hold, not the last name, but the full name, Ahmed Sultan Bin Sulayem, that put a lot of pressure on me. Simply because the founder and the co-founder of UAE is Sheikh Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum, late Sheikh Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum, and the founder is, as everyone knows, is Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. The first minister of state was Ahmed Sultan bin Sulayem. So I was the joke of the family. Every time I make a mistake, from the year 4 years old to kindergarten, even my late grandfather from my mother's side, who passed away, I think when I was 5 or 7 years old, because I didn't say a word in Arabic. And he picked me up and told my mother, "What did you do to the child? He doesn't speak Arabic." And I didn't even, you know, in Arabic it's customary to touch the nose when you say hi, just like in New Zealand, when you say hello. But instead I went to my grandfather and I shocked him by saying, "High five." And this was what, 1982 maybe or something, and he picked me up and told my mother, "This is not Ahmed Sulayem. This is Jimmy Carter, you brought me here. Send him back." But started off at a young age. I mean, I had a good relationship with him at a young time. I do have some good memories. But between my uncles, not from my mother's side, they were a bit more mellow and calm, which kind of I take from a lot. And I had to adapt because that's the introvert side. The world we live in is an extroverted world, and I had to adapt to that. And once I adapted and know the ropes and all that, I think it added some confidence later in my life. But talking about my uncles, you have to understand, how do I put this? My father, the pioneer of the first free zone, which we just beat. I had to beat it so I can be acknowledged. So Javza was beaten, what was it, 3 months back?
That's right.
4 months back, we beat their numbers. The expectations for me to be complacent or the management to relax, no way. That's the foundation for more.
But the key question, Ahmed,
no, I'm coming to that.
Okay.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. But people understand what's underneath the iceberg. They understand the situation. So then you have my uncle Muhammad, who, despite all challenges, held on to his Toyota Celica, sold his Rolex watch according to his story, I think he was funded by his cousin, Sheikh Ahmed Bin Sulayem for these races, but his story, not my story. And he's been number 2, number 3 for a while until he beat Al-Hajari. And competition in these places gets too fierce. In Qatar, they made a mistake, and Al-Hajari, who used to be always number 1, he cherishes competition. Unfortunately, he had a confused brother or cousin who pulled a rock in the middle of the race. And the way rally racing is done is that you have trials. You can't really go for it and expect to have great numbers until you have trials. And in these trials, you don't put in your mind that someone will come in a 4-wheel and put a rock in the middle. That almost ended my uncle's life. He got out of hospital. He still has the metal in his neck. He could have been paralyzed. Al-Hajari and Qatar apologized for the incident, but my uncle came back to racing and broke so many records that it actually impressed Kimi Räikkönen so much that he switched from Formula to rally, and after winning a few championships, he came back to the Formula racing. That's something I wouldn't do. I'm in DMCC, JLT. If I ever leave, it will be probably in the hotel business or something. I'm getting to your point now. I don't want to bore you for that. My uncle Ahmed Bin Sulayem was one of the founders of DTCM. His probably top moment is when the recession kicked in. He forced Jumeirah International, Atlantis, the big boys, to slash prices 50% when the recession just kicked in. And they were happy with the rates. People were paying and all that. And he said, nope, by rule, you slash the prices. The minibar, the food, service, everything by 50%. Why? To keep the footfall coming. He saved Dubai when it comes to tourism coming in here. So he preempted that. These are things I learned from best practices. With my father, there's a free zone, there's the port stories. I think that's pretty much well documented. So what created the spark? There was a spark. I never wanted to be my uncle, my father, and my other uncle, or even my grandfather. My response is like they would tell me to be 10% of the late Ahmed Bin Sulayem. I said, not even 1%. I'm not him, period. I'll do what I can. And I joined DMCC to gain experience. One thing led to another. It became a real free zone. I joined in, and I only wanted to be an employee. Do my job, go home. Do my job, go home. That's all I wanted. That's all what introverts want, really. They do their job, they go home. But we live. And I brought up the Al-Hajari thing. I was looking for the YouTube, actually, to not name and shame, just put out how people, sometimes things get out of hand. And someone told me, if I get you the video, just don't bring up my name. I said, fine, whatever. But it did happen, and it's well documented. And you know, looking at people that go against the waves inspire me. But what changed while I was working in DMCC? We used to have consultants that advise us, me and Tawfiq Abdullah, our former CEO. And the challenges were not just the market. The market didn't believe any of this would happen because it failed in other areas, with areas that have bigger pockets. And there are too many free zones. It's too distracting. On top of that, not a lot of people understood the commodities market. So as time passed by, I learned more and more by interacting with our members. As you mentioned, 15% are here, and they probably delegated their work to others to follow up their job, but they're here because of the mutual respect we have with each other, and they're the closest thing I have to a family. It's surreal for me when I go to Almas Tower and see members that I promoted on paper what Almas is and that area, and I see them coming and going. And we aged a little bit, let's admit it. We did age a little bit, huh? That's the difference a little bit. But in any case, what changed? There was pressure, not from other cities, from Dubai, internal competition. Nobody wanted to join DMCC, yet again people were criticizing DMCC, and we didn't start yet. That's like planting a seed and demanding the tree next day. It was unfair, yet I accepted it. There were internal struggles a little bit, yet I accepted it and I had to handle it. In addition to the executive chairman of DMCC, I've taken up the HR director for a second time. And I'm more known when I was chief operating officer in the early days of DMCC. I was more known when it comes to HR matters and firing people more than hiring. But when it comes to hiring, I look for the jewels. This time around, you know, I have more experience and all that, but doesn't mean I'm not going to fire as much. It depends really on the employee that's there. What changed, you ask me? The unnecessary criticism of DMCC. Some from the media, I had to call them in the office, explain and all that. And as the result came by, they realized this is happening. So they had to tone it down. There are very few that want to see a different story. Look, everything comes to an end someday, but hopefully not on my watch. And with God's will, we'll keep pushing harder. But that rubbed me the wrong way, and I did not come to work as an employee anymore. I came to work every day to make a point, or maybe 3 points. So that's what changed. That's what really changed. To make a point in Dubai, even though people say you've made your point. Just now when I was coming here, I had an SMS of one of the partners of Zuma. What are you doing this evening? He's ultra retired. So I said, I have this function in EMBD. I sent him the link from Google, Gulf News. He says, Ahmed, take a break. And my response to him, he's a family friend. He probably sees himself as a godfather, God forbid. So he sends me, you should take a break. My response to him, when you're the man who pays me and the man I work for, then you can say take a break. For now, come and enjoy the show at Shangri-La. That was my response. The last few years is something that I enjoy. The only time that I really felt frustrated is when the recession kicked in, even though it didn't affect us, and I could not expose the fact that we are the second Dubai government creditor to sign up. I couldn't expose that because it will send the wrong message. And I don't want anyone to think that we're complacent and we're just talking about that story. We have work to do. We're a creditor. That will be worked out. But that frustrated me because it made me think back at all the years that I couldn't spend with family, and you know, my brothers who grew up fast, and that really affected me. We pulled through, and we went fast. We went fast. We were registering companies left and right, and some of the challenges before the recession was companies could not move here because they couldn't bring their middle management to live here. It was too expensive. Property market was too greedy. And we were asked about this. I was asked about this ad that says, "Don't worry, there is no bubble." I'm not sure if this is Dubai government. I think it's a broker trying to bring more business. There is no bubble. I mean, you choose the place next to work, or next to your best, next to your. Well, when I was doing my college year, either next to the university and food store. That's what's important for me. Food store and school. So work and, you know, and all that. That's what's important. But it changed twice, really. It changed once when I got rubbed the wrong way a few times, and my response is always in action. Never be concerned if I'm arguing with you. Be concerned when I'm quiet because you don't know what will happen. Sometimes I don't know what will happen. The second time around is when the recession kicked in, and it's as if Dubai was the worst thing that ever happened. The media went nuts, and some of them have been waiting for this. I know for a fact some of them have been waiting for this since the 80s, especially the Arabic media. With no shame, they jumped on Dubai like it was nobody's business. If you calculate the amount of Dubai bashing from the Arabic media, it's actually more bashing than on Israel. That is not normal. That's not journalism. Everyone knows that. But in today's age, I can sit here and say that. I can tweet that, and I can get away with it, and the MC probably wants to run away from me right now.
No, not at all. I'm listening, everybody's listening. And,
okay. Well, in any case, this is what changed. This is what changed. And gaining experience and learning from the Indian community, from the Lebanese community, from the African community. Guess what? The Lebanese were in Africa as well. It was a nice advice I got from an old diamantier in Lebanon when I first visited South Africa. He asked me, so what are you doing here? Well, we're here to meet the government of Africa to see how we can collaborate and bring, we can complement, and you know, we have the diamond exchange and we're at auctions. He says, if you want to slow it down, work with the government. If you want to expedite the matter, you talk to us. We'll tell you what needs to be done. And we did, and he was right. We talked to all the diamantiers, all the commodity industries. Where we fall short, and this is the next market that we're going to get into by hook or crook, even if I have to learn their language, is the Latin market. That is something that Dubai and DMCC has fallen short. South America, for commodities, as far as I'm concerned, is a big must. There are a lot of tycoons that have moved to Oman because they don't know much about Dubai. But if the communication is there, we'll get them here. And we have a few Latin companies.
I think one of the things on the Latin companies is they are strong on coffee and you're strong on tea. Why don't you build a coffee exchange?
Because the coffee industry doesn't want it. The coffee is already listed in exchanges, but tea is not there. We have a tea center, we don't have a coffee center. And the coffee has advanced so much that you don't hear people, let's go to this tea center, tea place. You see tea shop, or they say cafe and all that. So in branding, with the likes of Cafe Nero and others, they know their business and they all have different ways. But when it comes to tea, they don't want to do that. They don't want to commercialize tea. That's why it's not listed in any other exchange. The coffee industry are happy in having mass trading and price discovery on exchanges. But tea, like diamonds, refuse, because they sell you Malawi tea, Indian tea. There's even a rule in India, if you add 10% of non-Indian origin tea, it can't be branded as Indian tea. So there's a lot of complication in the tea industry, even though it's produced in the same environments as coffee. Again, it comes to the producer and industry and the market, the end users. What do you really care about tea? It's become a habit. It's in the movies. They always have coffee. They're into everything. You will not see some superstar saying, I need a cup of tea, because that will sound feminine for some reason. That's how deep it is. And there will be a day where we work it out. I mean, we tried to do a project with Tijari, and we called it Community. And everyone said they're on board, and that's the lesson we learned for DGCX. Sign them up, the market makers. Don't take their words for it. They pulled back because they don't like their tea to be commercialized. They like their tea to be handled as, how do I put this? Beyond the delicacy. It's our tea, it's our identity, and it's different. So it's a different kind of challenge, but hey, Dubai is a #1 re-exporter of tea, and coffee is doing well everywhere. I mean, it failed miserably in, not coffee, but Starbucks failed miserably in Australia. I don't know how many they opened, but you know how Starbucks business plan is. There's no ad for Starbucks. You won't hear on the radio, come to Starbucks. You won't even, maybe on the papers, but I even doubt that. There's the Starbucks story or whatever it's called, the book about it and all that, but there's no ads. They just see a coffee shop, an old one, and they buy it, and they brand it as Starbucks. They don't open new Starbucks very much. That's how they did it in the US. Ashaya handles everything outside the US. So in Australia, they opened Starbucks in a lot of places, thinking we're Starbucks and people will buy our tea. It had nothing to do with cost, but the end users in Australia are very peculiar about their barasti, about how it's done, and the quality. And they were very public that this is the worst coffee ever. 90% or 70% of Starbucks in Australia shut down. That is an impossibility that for someone to expect that. 10%, moving them around, putting Starbucks in the exact footfall, paying extra money, fine. But even that did not work on Australia, because you can get the host to the river, you can't force it to drink the water. And that's what happened to Starbucks. And I've learned a lesson from that. You gotta look at the success stories, but you have to look at the failure stories. You have to understand why, for example, Samsung is doing better than iPhone. You have to understand what's the difference here. You look at these things, you look at these trends. Don't be too much in your own world. Don't, as His Highness stated, don't expect, always inspect.
I mean, as a director in 2002, but that's what your titles were?
Nope. If you go back to 2002, DMCC is a concept that's set to fail. That's what everyone was saying. And that's what you would say, and I wouldn't blame you because of the track record. And I came in as what am I, 35? It's over 12 years ago, so 23-year-old. Nobody would take me serious. In fact, even at 35, if I joined at that time, they wouldn't take me serious because there's no background. Now I have the luxury of saying I have a 12-year track record. I have you saying coming in as a big title, but what people don't know is that it was a volunteer at first, and I moved in to learn. It doesn't matter what the position. Look at the banking industry. Everyone's vice president of something. Does that mean anything? Doesn't mean nothing.
How many vice presidents do we have here?
Not you guys, the kids, that you give them vice president of, I don't know. How do you pull that off? And the salary is like a normal executive. But in any case...
so you spent your early days wanting to learn and wanting to develop. Is
always.
That how you developed?
It will never end. Learning, you never end. You have to always learn. And actually, in the last 3 years, I learned more than the last 12 years put together.
Right.
Especially when the recession kicked in. My message to my father and His Highness was, when the recession kicked in, I said, this is the best thing that ever happened. And they were like, why? Because no consultant can tell